to bringing you this program. I'm just doing a little civic pitch right now. I know a lot of you are not from Southold Peconic, which is awesome. Thank you for coming. It's an important topic for our entire town, not just our hamlets. We formed in 2022. Each hamlet now has a civic, so I encourage you to join your local civic association. We're engaged, we're involved, we're doing our best to make our town a better place and educate the public about the things that we're wondering about too. So if you have any ideas for future programs, you can jot them down on your way out. We also have feedback forms back there, which we find really helpful for us to let us know if our program was worthwhile, if there's something else you want to hear about. So if you could fill one of those out on your way out the door, that would be really helpful. This topic is an important one. We've also covered some other important ones like affordable housing. We've talked about septic upgrades and environmental issues, and we do our best to keep you informed. So that's my point. They are worthwhile. And we're all volunteers. So if you can volunteer, please do so. I'm going to introduce Katie Stokes, who is our the treasurer on our board and put this program together for us. And then she's going to introduce you what our program is all about, and we'll have some Q&A at the end.
Great. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming. So we're here today first to celebrate the town, who has recognized how frustrated so many of us are that our cell phones work everywhere else except when we're getting near home here in Southold, or anywhere near town, or depending, again, also on the carrier, right? And so the town has recognized and gotten feedback now from a lot of the community, and they're now trying to put together some proposals to try and fix that. So we have one speaker here today, Heather Lanza, from the town, who's really familiar with sort of how we've gotten to where we are and what the town is proposing to do going forward, and is looking for feedback on that. There is going to be a public hearing later in January, so once we all get informed, we can then all go speak at the public hearing if we feel motivated. And then we also have with us Tanya Nygren today, who has been very involved for decades in the siting and placing of cell towers. And so between the two of them, they're going to be able to sort of share with us how things work here, and what the proposal is going forward. So we're going to let them each speak, and then we're going to ask questions. But I actually want to do a quick little quiz before we start. I just want to know, people here in the room, what carrier do you use? So, who here uses T-Mobile? Great. Who here uses Verizon? Oh, that's a popular one, apparently. Who here uses AT&T? Are there any others? I guess those are the main ones.
Dish, Optimum.
Yeah, or anybody use Dish or Optimum for cell phone?
They're largely using the same infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right, so it seems like we have a sense of why some people may be motivated here. Okay, then with that, let me just turn it over to Heather Lanza from the town. Yay, Heather.
Thanks, Katie. All right, so thank you to Southold Peconic Civic for holding this forum. I think it's really important, and they're doing great work.
Thanks, Heather.
Okay, so for my portion of this, I'm going to talk about the steps the town's taking to improve cell service in the town. Our existing regulations for cell towers, they were written back when we didn't rely on cell phones like we do today. So back around 2007, 2008, it appeared that building towers was a bit like building houses on speculation. It was valuable vertical real estate. It seemed like they were being proposed wherever there was a willing landowner. The concern was that more towers than were needed would end up being built at that time. So the emphasis then on the regulations was to look at the number of towers, make sure there weren't too many being built, ones that were necessary, and that they were not higher than they needed to be, and that they didn't end up places that they didn't belong. So our regulations from then, which still exist today, contain really severe limits on height and location for new towers. From a community character perspective, it was a success, but ultimately it's failed us, and that has prevented our infrastructure from being built out to provide the coverage we need. So today, as we all know, we rely very heavily on wireless communications. Some stats I read in our new master plan that most households are wireless only with no landline at all, and 80% of calls to 911 are made from cell phones. Also today, and actually they've been around for a while, there's federal guidelines that our regulations have to be updated to include. So there's FCC regulations that have evolved, and they're in place to ensure our wireless infrastructure is built out more quickly, and our current regulations don't match up to that. Also, to get more complete coverage in the town, we need to consider small cell deployment, and I'll get more into that later, but our code doesn't contemplate small cell deployment right now. So steps the town's taking, trying to get situated here, to address the issue. First, we hired Cityscape. That's our technical consultant for wireless matters. They have the technical know-how to help us evaluate things like the dead zones and then engineer the ideal locations for new wireless infrastructure so we can get more coverage. They created a master plan for Southold. They conducted a poll and to gauge the public's preference for how this infrastructure should look, and then we're currently working on revising our regulations. So a quick overview of our wireless master plan. The main thing to know about the plan is that it identifies from an engineering standpoint the best way forward to improve cell service in Southold Town. It contains an inventory and analysis of all our existing sites. It takes into account their height and the surrounding topography, and then engineers figured out optimal locations for new towers to get improved coverage throughout the town. It also has some really useful explanations, so if you haven't seen it, it's posted on our zoning update website. I'll put that address up on the last slide. It has great explanations about how things work and why we need more coverage to get better service. This morning I'm going to get right to the result of that rather than go into all the details. Basically, what's recommended to get better coverage in our town. So the plan starts out with evaluating existing wireless infrastructure. So the complete inventory is in that master plan. It has, the location, the height, what carriers are on it, and I'm just going to go through a few of them so you can see the different types of towers. So currently in Southold we have 15 wireless facilities in the town itself. In the village, there's also that really large radio tower, and then there are wireless antennas on the water tank tower. And out on Fisher's Island, there's actually a provider in a church steeple, which we used to have one here in Cutchogue, but I think they took it out. The tower in this picture is one of the earliest cell towers in the town. This is at the town animal shelter. It's a type of construction called lattice tower, and it's 145 feet tall. And here's a few more local towers. The Southold Fire District on the left here has something called a non-concealed monopole, meaning the antennas are on the outside of the pole and you can see them. And that's a pretty short pole. It only has T-Mobile on it. It's only 59 feet tall. The next one in the middle is something called a concealed unipole, meaning the antennas are concealed inside the pole. This is at the storage center on Horton's Lane, and it's 90 feet tall, and it has AT&T, and I thought they added Verizon, but maybe not. I think they were proposing and didn't do it. But that could accommodate all the carriers and get added onto. And then this is partially finished tower shown at Albertson Marine. It's the newest tower on the east end of Southold Hamlet. It's pretty much finished. It's just, Tanya can talk a little bit more about the state it's in. And this is also something called a concealed unipole. That one is 150 feet tall. And then after assessing the existing towers, Cityscape created maps showing the different levels of coverage. And I'm going to show you a map, but first I want to show you what the colors mean. So it's a little hard to tell the yellow and green apart, but yellow is the best signal strength, meaning you get signal inside a building. Green is going to show you where you get signal inside a vehicle, and blue is going to show you where you can only get signal outdoors. And if it's white, it means there's no service. Oops. So then this map is in the master plan, and it's basically addressing the coverage issues. So since Cityscape couldn't evaluate each carrier individually, the map doesn't predict exact coverage for a particular cell company like AT&T or Verizon. So there may be worse or better coverage for a particular carrier than what's shown here. But what this map does help us understand is where do we need new infrastructure, where are the priority areas for improvement. So I can zoom in a little bit on Southold Peconic, so we can see a little bit more. So the dots are actual towers. So this is Albertson Marine, this is no, this one's a Horton's Lane. The firehouse is over here. It's not on this map because it's hard to expand that one, but it doesn't mean it doesn't count. It's just not shown on this map. And then this is the animal shelter over here. So you can see that it's the outskirts that have the white up near the sound, and it's really bad out on our peninsulas like Bayview and Nassau Point. So there is some yellow, but a lot of green.
Where is the closest one to Laurel?
Excuse me?
Where is the closest tower to Laurel?
To Laurel, at the Laurel Stone.
Well, North Oakwood, for example.
Excuse me?
Laurel, L-A-U-R.
Yes, the
Yes.
closest one there is Laurel Stone.
She said Laurel Stone.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
It's on Route 25.
Yes.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you, thank you.
They did. It's a Riverhead Building Supply now, but everyone knows it as Laurel Stone. Okay, here we go. By the way, I'm not an expert, Tanya is, so there's gonna be some questions I can't answer that she'll be able to answer when I'm done. So next came the recommendation for how to improve coverage. So this map shows you the existing towers. I should have been more clear about that. These are all the existing towers in town. You have Orient Fire District, the Ferry, the East Marion Fire District, Albertson Marine, the tower in, this is the big radio tower in Greenport Village. This is the water tank. This is a little pole in, I don't know, that's Albertson Marine. There's also a little pole in off of Chapel Lane in the PSEG power station, substation. We talked about those. Ugh. These are the other towers, sorry. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but we do have an inventory that we can get into if you have questions later for particular towers. Next, the recommendation for how to improve coverage. So this map shows you the existing towers that start with the letter S, and then the things that start with a P are proposed macro sites or cell towers. So, for instance, PMO3 would be, if you put a tower here, you get some better service. The pink dots are showing where small cell deployment would be needed. And just so, if, in case you're wondering about small cell, because I had no idea what it looked like, small cell is deploying antennas and equipment on utility poles along the roads. So you would have a lot more stations, you know, you'd have to have basically hundreds of them, but if you target certain areas where you can't get big towers, you can get better coverage using these little things. So you have antennas at the top of a utility pole with some equipment attached. And these are two examples from East Hampton. And then this is a standalone. This isn't, I don't know what this is, so it's just an example picture, so you see what they could potentially look like. So back to this map that shows improving the coverage with better deployment. You see the pink dots are like on Bayview and Nassau Point. That's where small cell would work because there really aren't places to put towers out there. Same thing with along the Sound, all these residential neighborhoods. Small cell could really help if it was deployed out there. And then with the 7 new towers that are proposed here, we'd have a great increase in coverage as shown by all the yellow on this map now. The next thing, excuse me. After the master plan, the cityscape conducted a poll. I'm going to go through some of the results of that poll. The entire detailed results are posted on our zoning website also. So basically the survey was open for about a month this summer. There were 35 questions about mobile phone usage, experiences with coverage, and visual preferences for cell towers. We had 773 people respond, which is really a very good response for a poll in this town. The first section looked at people and their access to networks. Basically, most of the people responding live here year-round. There was about 70%. Another 20% were people who are here seasonally. So that's the majority of the responders, with a scattering of others. This gets at the question of what carriers were the people who responded using. I think Verizon probably has the worst service, and that's why most people, people who have great service probably didn't take the poll and aren't as concerned as people who don't. So there's definitely that slight bias here, which is good because it's letting us know there's a big problem. Asking people to rate their cell phone coverage inside their home. Not many people said excellent. Most people said it was poor or inconsistent. A few said it was acceptable. Rating the cell phone coverage while traveling around town in your car, most people said it was poor or inconsistent. And then the next part of the poll talked about visual preferences. So this question, and I'm not hitting them all, but this was one of the questions about something called non-concealed towers. So we have 4 of those now in Southold Town. The rest are concealed. The message received from this question was people feel strongly that the service matters more than the aesthetics. So you can see this lattice tower, 32% said that's fine. The big guide tower, 39% said that was okay. You know, this has, I don't know if you can see them, but this is probably 3 times as tall as this. And it has these wires, so it takes up a lot of room. And then the 27% said the monopole with the non-concealed antennas was also okay. Then people were asked if there were going to be visual mitigation measures, which do they prefer? This kind of surprised me because this is a monopine, and most people said that one. But the ones I've seen don't look this nice, so I don't know if this is a special one or if it's just the way the picture was taken. And then you have your painted monopole and then your fully concealed unipole. Another question there was, would you support replacing and this is a local question, the existing lattice tower at the animal shelter. So that's the one you can see kind of from all over when you're in the middle of town. It's currently 145 feet, and if it was increased to 199 feet, it would do a really good job expanding coverage. And that's what the little map here shows. So you can see that there's these green areas here and here and here, and if this was increased to a height, you're going to reduce the green, turn a lot of it to yellow if you expanded that height. So most people said, yes, go ahead and do that. So that's in our master plan. Then they were asked this question about macro cells, being the big towers versus the small cell type deployment we saw earlier. So the question was, do you think we should do all macro cells, that's the larger towers and fewer antenna locations, or all small cell, which would involve many hundreds of poles to accomplish, or a hybrid mix of both? And most people said the hybrid mix was the one they preferred. And then this question was about which macro cell tower design type do you prefer? And interestingly, people did choose the concealment tower over the non-concealed. And then, but then, this balances that out with what's most important to you. Is it excellent cell phone coverage? Is it aesthetics, visual? Is it good connectivity with minimal visual impact? And so the blue shows, most people said the most important thing is the connectivity and the coverage. Aesthetics is shown in red a tiny bit, and then this is the good connectivity and minimal visual impact. So I think people are still looking for some balance there. This was about location preferences, so private property basically versus public property. 55% said public property was preferred, and 53% said any place needed to improve service. And only 3% said private property was preferred. And then this gets at the reasons why that people had for choosing public versus private. So over 50% said that all of the reasons listed here were why they chose what they chose for public. So it's all about, if it's on public property, the revenue, which is pretty significant, comes to the town, which is basically the taxpayers, versus a private property owner. And then they talked about controlling the overall design and aesthetics and the location. And then I forgot, I meant to cut this one off, but it's kind of funny. Shows the mood. So then when we looked at the existing code and compared it to the survey results, they came up, and I say they because Cityscape did most of this work, and I have to acknowledge them. I, like I said, not the expert, just the messenger. So looking at our current code, which emphasizes aesthetics and scenic preservation, the survey results say you need to add the priority of coverage and public necessity for safety. That has to change in our code. The height of 80 feet is capped right now, and there's a lot of support for much taller towers, which are needed. The current code promotes these concealment towers, and the survey made it clear we need to expand what the acceptable designs are. Right now, our current code, it's difficult to get, not difficult to get through the process, but there's a longer process than there needs to be. So there's a lot of support for getting these sites up and running faster. And both the code and the survey results support co-location, meaning less towers, put all the carriers on one tower instead of having 4 all in one place, and then dissuading those lattice and guide out type towers in terms of new infrastructure. So then the next step is the new code, which we're hoping will help move this along. The consultant already drafted code. The town boards had 2 code committee meetings on this, so we have a draft code. I can expect on Tuesday, we're hoping the town board will set a hearing May not be till actually early February, depending on the logistics. It may also not get set Tuesday, it may get set at their special meeting on December 30th. So those are the variables we're dealing with for setting the hearing for the new code. But just a little bit about the new code. It increases the height allowed for towers from 80 feet to 140 feet. It allows for even taller if the need's shown. So for example, the engineers looked at a 180-foot tower at the Cutchogue Fire District, and that showed great results. So because that's in our master plan, that would be potentially allowed. It allows more construction options, so the non-concealed poles, for example, if they make more sense somewhere. It provides a faster permitting process, and it talks about small cell deployment. So it allows those, and gets into the details about those. It also acknowledges coverage as a public necessity. It has a bunch of new definitions to be consistent with our the federal code. There's a particular discussion in there about a faster permitting process for any new tower that's proposed within a half mile of where they're shown on that plan I showed you with the new sites. So if it's on, also, and then there's these priorities, sorry, that's what this is about. So there's a preference list, and number one is within a half mile of those tower locations. And then town-owned property is the first preference, and then roadside is second, and then other taxing districts like fire or school, and then other property in the town. And then the preference for construction type is, number one is concealed, and number two is the monopoles. And then the new proposed code also includes regulations to allow these small cell facilities where towers aren't feasible, so think down on Bayview, or places that are very residential and don't have a lot of larger lots available. Nassau Point's another area. And so, as I mentioned, the town board is expected to schedule this hearing pretty soon. So that's it for mine. If you want to follow up and know more, the website is here on this slide. There's a page that has the actual master plan, the inventory. Well, actually, that's not there yet, but I'll put it there. And then the survey results in a lot more detail. So thank you very much for your interest.
And then before we have questions, we're actually going to have Tanya talk, and then we'll have questions for both, all right? So Tanya, why don't we turn it right over to you?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time that you're allowing me to speak today. I am on the other side of this whole scheme of things when it comes to placing a wireless telecommunications facility in a town. So I've been doing this, and I mentioned this to Heather, since we had pagers. So when I say that, I date myself, and a lot of times I get questions like, what is a pager, or what is a beeper? So I did start at that time, when there was no GPS, no navigation, no digital cell phones, no cameras, digital cameras. We were taking pictures where I had to develop them and say, this is the site I'm looking at. And I would have to make 6 copies at CVS and then mail them out to the people who had to look at it. So I've kind of been through the whole evolvement of wireless facilities on Long Island. And so Heather did a spectacular job at kind of explaining the different type of facilities, where these facilities are needed. So I will have a very short presentation. And so we'll go with, what do you see is okay.
Can you go to full screen?
Let's see. Because it's a PDF, it's not a, like a PowerPoint where but is this okay? Okay, so as we had mentioned earlier, Heather said that there are primary operators here on Long Island. She asked, Katie asked as well, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Dish. Dish right now is definitely not in the play. They've had some issues lately, so pretty much everyone raised their hand either for AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile. And so these are millions of subscribers. We know because everyone, I would assume, in the room probably has a cell phone in their pocket right now. And so that has evolved greatly in the past 30 years or so that I've been in the industry. And so when we talk about the facilities and how these facilities work, this is just a generic schematic showing how if the tower is 120 feet, every 10 feet of vertical space, there are antennas inside. And so those antennas will be specific per carrier. So it's not that they share the same space or same plane. You would probably have, like, let's say Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and another carrier underneath. Sometimes the carriers will deploy two different types of technology. You've heard of 4G, 5G. Sometimes they take two, one for 5G, one for 4G, depending on the technology they're rolling out. And so that's why there's so many what we call canisters. And so every 10 feet of space allows this carrier to propagate out from there. And so that signal for us is very low powered. It probably goes about a mile, mile and a half, which is why when you see all of the towers that Heather mentioned, they're not propagating too far because the height is low and the signal the power is very low. And so when we talk about that and look at these facilities, yeah, we would love to have them to be optimized, but sometimes it's not about turning up the power because we're regulated highly to do that. It's the height, it's line of sight, it's the tree, it's topography. You know, it depends if they're bluffs or if there's it just depends if there's a hill in the way. So these things aren't just, you set them up and then it just works. There is some other things that we have to look at in order to accommodate the signal and what we need to do and the code requirements. This is just what we call a compound layout. It's usually enclosed and each carrier has its own space. They don't share, they all have their own frequencies, so they all have their own space within the compound. And the circles where, let's say, the concealment pole is, and each of those rectangles will be either for Verizon, T-Mobile, or AT&T. So when we talk about the levels in which the carriers operate, and we talk about compliance, the FCC has to make sure that each of the carriers are within compliance, and that's with emissions. And when you look at something like this, you see that the allowable limit is a red line going across. That's our limit, the FCC limit at 100%. So if we are proposing a new facility, which we always do a FCC compliance report, it's something that we file. This specifically are the levels for the Albertson Marine facility, in which she had mentioned earlier. And so if you look at the blue, that's our total. So we're well below the allowable limits. Just because we're so low powered and highly regulated, that's where we are. That's where we can be, and that blue is where we are. And so when you look at this, we take into consideration everything that's in the area. It would be the fire district, propagating signals, each of the carriers, and anything else within the environment and the area. So I know that many people say, oh, it's microwave, it's microwave. It's radio waves. It's like when you turn on your radio back in the day and it wasn't really digital, it's the same thing. It's not heating your food in a microwave. These are not the signals. And so when we gather the information and put it in these reports, they're made available to the public. You can always ask for them for any facility. And so then you can check for yourselves to see who is operating at what and what the power levels are and what is allowable so that you know that we're working within our compliance. So when we talk about the coverage in the area, and I know Heather also covered this as well, when we look at this, you can see I have T-Mobile turned on, Verizon, and AT&T, because I know that's what's out here. And for me, green are where the sites are and where you have service. Red and anything dark red is not good.
Wow.
So, that's as can see you have plenty of red and not that much green. And this is actual data that's pulled from your cell phone. Even though you turn off, don't track me, don't share this information, the information is still tracked by the carriers because that's how they know your cell phone doesn't work. And so when you look at this, you can see that the data that's being collected from your actual cell phone, this is real data that's letting us know there's a deficiency. And so that's why the town is working very diligently on trying to being able to just find a way to plug up the holes that we have here. And so this is just, again, just a visual picture of what we have here. And so a lot of the facilities that I have built throughout the 30 years, they look like cell towers. And so these are just, very quickly, different villages, towns, and Ambets Hall. They all, this is Mattuck, which we did here as well. We all try to make sure that the antennas are within it. You have it visually less impactful to your environment. You don't want your eye really drawn to it. The only time that we have anything externally mounted would be for the fire district or any emergency service provider because they cannot place their whip antennas within the tower. So you'll see them at the very top or clamped onto the actual steel base of the towers so that they also can provide service in the area. And so this is Stony Brook, as you can see the whip antennas on the very top. And they can be painted to whatever color. It could be light on the top, dark on the bottom, and they can be placed pretty much anywhere that there is sufficient space, but we try to put them where the code allows us. And just in general, we have, I think we've only built 3 in the town of Southold. Mattuck, Lowellstone, and Albertson Marine. So in 30 years, I was able to build 3. So that is, it's a testament to the wireless code, right? It did what it was supposed to do. We just didn't build these things anywhere and everywhere, right? So we have to be very strategic as to need and where it can be placed. And so now that the code is being adopted, it's just, I don't want to say easier. I think it's just more of an awareness of where they really need to be, strategically place them where they should be. And then where they cannot be in residential areas, you now have another option, and so that's, to me, a plus. And so as we just look at a couple of projects, there's antennas within Cherry Grove up on the top where the beavers are. These are just on buildings where you can paint them to match or just attach them to there. And this was Laurelstone, but one of the canisters were open for maintenance. But again, these are just the way the facilities that we build them now. We don't do lattice, we don't do the guide wires, we don't do the monopoles with the antennas outside because although we answer to the town as well, we also have to file with the state, sometimes with DOT, and so there are other layers in which you do not see that are far beyond what the town has control over. And again, we have to coordinate with all the other agencies to make sure that we're doing everything that we can again, within the confines of whatever the rules and regulations are. But in general, this is at a high school, ESM in Manorville. They opted to have, they do fly the flag on this as well, but they wanted to put ESM, and on the other side, I believe it says Sharks. So it's, they just wanted to be seen. So I guess, you know, we'll do what we can as long as it's aesthetically pleasing, and that we don't have too much opposition in reference to it. But again, these are the facilities that we do, and that's a little bit of what I do, and
Can you just tell us about the Albertson Bowl and sort of how long that process was and when it was?
So for Albertson Marine, it took a number of years to get it up. However, I think that the most challenging thing about that, and again, with the permitting, we did everything that we had to do, but it's also near the water, so we had to be cognizant of that. There was an extra layer of review for that as well. And again, DOT, because it's their road, and so we had to coordinate with them and try to make sure we're doing the right things there. But when we do something like that, and again, it's a very tall tower because it's not according to the code when it comes to height requirements. We went through 2 or 3 hearings at the time. It was 2, maybe 2. Zoning and planning, right? For the height. Yeah, height, but setbacks, yeah. So we, again, these are things that as we're working through how the process should be, it may have taken a little longer just because the code requirements. And so the height and the setbacks and things like that sometimes trigger an extra hearing. And so that goes with notices, and then after you do the notices, it takes some time for them to leave the record open, and they get comments, and they get the feedback, and so it takes a little bit. So it did take a few years for us to get that through the process. However, now with the new code, it seems to be, I don't want to say friendlier, I just think we're more aware of what is needed and what we need to make sure that we comply with.
And when is Verizon coming up on?
So Verizon is installed, however, they're having issue with fiber. And because fiber is on the other side of the road, of the main road, DOT has to be involved. And so we have no control over their process. The state will review and issue their permit whenever they get to it. So for us, that's the only holdup. Literally, their equipment is there, the cable is there, antennas, everything is there, but they're having issue with connectivity for fiber.
I have a question.
Yeah.
One thing I don't understand is, I know there are towers like along the spine of the North Pole, but in the business district of Southold, like where the supermarket is, there is zero coverage. You cannot get not one bar, not half a bar, not nothing.
Yeah.
Why is it that, at least on Verizon, you cannot get any service?
Verizon doesn't have any antennas installed near there.
I guess
Yeah, the only carrier that does have service there, and I don't know if it's sufficient service, is T-Mobile, because they're at the Southold headquarters. It's a very short site, and it's just T-Mobile there. And so Verizon users like myself, when we drive through there, I don't use my phone until I'm almost at Greenport. And it's just because of that. Not every carrier, when you see a tower, not every carrier is on that tower. And
So when new towers are going to be built, are they going to be shared or will they be exclusive?
no, they should be shared, and that's part of what Heather was discussing earlier. They're making sure that these facilities are going to accommodate everyone. And so, a lot of the carriers don't play nice with each other, so when they do propose something, sometimes it's shorter, like the T-Mobile tower, and it doesn't accommodate anyone else. When we develop the sites, a company like ours, we make sure that we can accommodate everyone. And it's something that we tell the town. We're accommodating every carrier. It doesn't matter who it is. And so that's the difference.
My question would be, after all these towers are installed, if there are still places in Southold that don't get service, is there a process to get, to apply for those telephone pole type of small units in the areas where the service is not good?
I believe that Heather did discuss that. Those are with the smaller sites, small cells. And so, yes, it's an application where if you have a utility pole, which obviously if you have power, then you have that utility pole, it can be attached to that utility pole where the service is not being covered by a macro site.
Yeah, I probably live 150 yards from Southold Town, office there.
Yeah.
And I have Verizon, and basically my service is between it sucks and non-existent.
Not existent, I know. I know, I'm with you on that too. We have it way back.
Yeah, thanks. This is dovetailing off that question and maybe more for Heather. I'm not sure. What are the steps? And I know you may not know them all, and I know you're the messenger. What has to happen for this small cell solution to be implemented? Because most of us are nowhere near towers. A lot of people in this room are on Main Bayview Peninsula, and I'm sure there are other areas. We have no service at all. I know you know about that. But, so hearing about the towers that are gonna go in the main areas is of less interest to some of us than how do we get to this other step, and what, if anything, can we do? I know there are huge numbers of regulations and bureaucracies we have to deal with, but is there anything we can do to make it happen faster?
I believe that as long as you connect with Heather's office and be aware of when the hearing is to adopt the new code, you're able to support that change. And so the change for the small cells is coming. I mean, it's in the new code that they're proposing. And so when you have that next hearing in January, I believe, maybe February, I would say come and support. Let them hear you, because a lot of times when it's the opposition that shows up, not the people who are usually in support of this new development. And so when they sit there and they don't hear from you, it's harder for them to gauge and decide, do we really need this? Which is why they did the poll, just to kind of figure out what's going on, because again, how else would they know if you don't speak to them? And so I do believe that if you can support the new changes, you'll see that.
But who initiates getting something? Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if I have the answer, but, you know, the next step after we get the new code, I think that's what you're asking about, how do we get this on the ground, is I know the town's gonna work with the carriers to figure out, look, what is it gonna take for you to come and do small cell deployment on Bayview, on Nassau Point?
Right.
So that's the next step is meeting with the carriers, meeting with, I don't know if you guys do small cell.
We also will work with you on that
Yeah,
too.
so, you know, working with companies like Elite to help bring everyone together and get going on.
Thank you both for sharing what you know.
We have a lot of questions. What, maybe
Yeah.
I need some, that'd be good.
Yeah, much better.
Yay.
I was wondering about, on Bayview, why can't we put a monopole at Cornell, which I think the quality of that, the architectural space of that, I think would allow for that, and there would be less smaller cells, which might quicken the whole process of getting service to Bayview. It seems that's a site that's very, almost industrial. I know it's agricultural, but I don't think the local residents would object to a monocell at Cornell, which would give great coverage to that area.
That's a good idea.
And I think reduce the amount of smaller cells, which would be very time consuming, it seems.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
The other possibility is if people, I don't know, as an artist, I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, it might be terrible, but you could commission artists to use the monopole as a site for color or gradation. I did a project in Germany where they invited artists to do projects around, in relationship to deployment of windmills outside of Hanover. And so that was a kind of interesting program, but I don't know, it might be really oppressive if you get the wrong artist.
In light of how long it has taken to get here, and
Could you speak up?
technology keeps changing, and I'm wondering, whatever the plans are, keeping that in mind, I mean, do you see any major technological change right around the corner that you should be?
Not from my standpoint and building these facilities for 3 decades, no. Only because I know people were speaking about satellites and, if it goes out to space and we can use those instead of, having these towers, it's latency. So by the time it gets to space and it comes back and we have that conversation, it's timing. So we're not there. Now, will we be there 10, 15 years from now? I don't know. I can't answer that. That's a really technical question, but I can tell you that with these facilities where they are now, we are continuing to deploy these. And if for some reason that, let's say there's just something, like you said, comes out where the towers aren't needed anymore, many of, I gotta say 100% of my agreements, if the tower is what we call naked, meaning it has no antennas, it's not propagating, we have to take them down. So it's also that part of the component in which, when I do these facilities, I make sure if it becomes something that's not being used, it will be removed.
Just, I guess, very practical question, who pays for all of these towers? Is it the town that's paying for it, or the carriers are going to pay for it?
In the case of what I do, I take the brunt of everything. So I will do the permitting, the engineering, architects, radio frequency report, everything is borne on my company. I take care of everything, and I own the structure, but then I share the revenue with the property owner. So if it's a town, we share the revenues, so you actually have more money coming into the town if I'm on town property, or if I'm on private property. It's just you're renting to me, and so you make money that way, but everything is on me. The entire project is on me.
So
How
you're
about the
funding the
telephone
infrastructure.
poles?
Now, the carriers do. You take care of the permitting for it, but the carriers pay for the electronics that go into the infrastructure. and they-
I pay for the tower, I pay for the construction of the tower, and if the fire district goes on there, I pay for their equipment, I pay for all of that installation. And the carriers are responsible for their own antennas and lines.
And so do you think though that the carriers will necessarily want to put in that extra amount of money to do this when either way, we're all paying a Verizon bill?
Oh, absolutely, because it's a game with them where they need to keep their subscriber base. And so they don't want you going to T-Mobile knowing that T-Mobile has a site on Main Road. So they will, and they know, and trust me, they know, your phone does not work here. And so they will put their antennas here.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, how can we incentivize them to do that? They may know, but they may not care. Because if you look at the
Oh, no, they
map,
care.
if you look at the coverage, I don't think they care, but if you look at the coverage map, we had great coverage where we had no population density. Where we have population density, we have no coverage. So they don't seem to be that incentivized. Is there anything in place for us to actually incentivize some of these carriers?
So what happens is, you as yourself can call and complain, and you go down a rabbit hole. It's just the nature of the
Which
beast.
is my point.
Yeah, and so companies like ours, which, you know, I've done this for many decades, I know who the radio frequency design engineer is. And so that person is the person I talk to. Hey, I have a site coming up, it's gonna be Southold and Main Street, you know, can you guys use this right now? And they'll let me know. And so that individual is just an engineer, but then he has to put a justification package together and say, okay, it's on Long Island, it's here, this is the call count, drop count. They put all of that together, and then I get to the manager of the company, and I go from there.
Understood, and I suppose the question was also for Heather, can the town incentivize these people?
Well, that's what we're trying to do with the new code, because I happen to know Verizon does care. They've been trying to build towers, and they've been thwarted by our code in a lot of instances. And we know, I have been receiving calls from Verizon since we've started this code discussion, saying they're very excited about it, they have a draft of it, they're commenting on it. So they're ready to go, and I think the new code's gonna help that along.
Definitely.
Two things. So in connection with the small cell deployment, I know that sometimes there are things that sound great, but have we gone to any town that has a lot of these small cells, and have we asked if they actually work and if the customers are satisfied with them? I guess I'm just wondering if we know that there is a good history with them. So I guess that's one question I have. And the other question I had, my understanding is that in the proposed code, it may be identical to the old code in the amount of space that has to be set aside for a tower, but it's actually more space than I think you guys actually need, right? Like how much space?
50 by 50.
Foot, right?
Mhm.
So that's less than a quarter acre, right? So I guess I'm wondering, but is it in the new code and the old code? Don't you require like 2 acres for a cell tower?
That's just a restriction for residential neighborhoods, so that your neighbor doesn't build one next to your house. in like a subdivision. So, but everywhere else, we don't have that restriction. And the code also said, if there is a good spot and it's less than 2 acres and everyone agrees it's a good spot, that can be waived.
Right.
But that would be like an extra hearing to
No,
go to.
not an extra hearing, no.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah, they're changing it, so that's the thing, and in the past, it has been challenging because of exactly what you're saying, and so now they're looking at that, and they know, because we've been through this a couple of times now where, you're right, you know, it's gonna seem impossible to get them, but as Heather mentioned, those are about to change, and so they take that into consideration.
And do you know about, are small cell things good?
It depends on where they're deployed, how much usage, because even though you have small cells, you do need macro for them to work off of. You can't just have only small cells, so they are intertwined. And so it's important to understand you do need macro and the small cells to work together. But like I said, there's areas where they do work fairly well. If I'm driving on Route 106 in Nassau County, they're there in Muttontown, and they actually work, because it's sometimes when I'm driving there, it's not 100 cars going through there, but just enough so that I can utilize my navigation system or if I'm on the phone.
And then I wonder, is there, sorry, my last question, is there a way, like, I think you said, Heather, that our, the consultant didn't have access to carrier coverage information. And you have some of that, I think. I guess I'm just wondering, like, it's not particularly helpful if the consultant says, well, great, there is coverage on Main Street, when for the majority of people, there is no coverage on Main Street because there's
It's
just
T-Mobile.
one carrier. So I'm just wondering if there's a way for the consultant to be able to make their maps and their information more rich by being able to see it actually really matters per carrier what the coverage is, not just that there's some carrier that has coverage.
So we all know that matters, and they didn't just say, oh, there's coverage on Main Street. They know there's not for some carriers, so they know that.
Oh, they do.
But there's already towers there, so their focus is where the towers need to go, okay? So we know that, but the other side of it is, we know, okay, this tower only has T-Mobile, or this tower only has AT&T, so we need to get all the carriers on the existing tower.
And the new one does say that it can't just be one carrier anymore. Great.
I was just asking for a little clarification, now I'm gonna forget the wording. You said for the small cell ones to work, they have to be able to talk to the macro, I think you said?
The taller structures. So
Yeah.
you don't need many of them at all, but they do need to carry that back somewhere. And so that's just how it works. It's almost like, in your house, I don't know if you're familiar with a mesh system. If you have, he's nodding yes. It's like Optimum comes to your house and you have the box, but it doesn't go all the way through your home. It's kind of like that. You need to bring the service in somewhere, and then you add a mesh system or a small cell system to just bring the signal out just a little further. That's the best analogy that I can.
So if we had just the towers that you're proposing, or the towers that are already here, and then you put those small cells in the area
That you need that.
then that's enough, or do we need, like, given what we know, are those small cells close enough in proximity to the macro cells to actually work?
They should, but I can't definitively say because I don't know where they're going or anything like that. There's a way to analyze the data and the information that you're requesting. So as the new sites come in, Heather's team will review that and they'll start asking those exact questions. Is it gonna plug the hole? How many do we need? Because they may come and say, oh, we need one, and then find out we really need 3 to cover a certain area. That is all submitted to the
One macro
town.
or one small cell? Sorry.
It could be a macro and then small cells.
Okay.
So again, it just depends on how they're able to provide proof of what is needed, and then it goes right into Heather, and Heather's team will review that.
And you just mentioned Optimum for the first time, I haven't heard it at all today. I thought that was the carrier, but
No, Optimum is not, no.
That's your home carrier.
That's your, yeah, that's for internet at home. I was just trying to, provide an analogy of how that might work between macro sites and smaller sites. It's the same like in your home with internet.
I understand.
Yeah, you have to bring it into the house first, and then you can kind of disperse it. I think you were raising your hand.
You can, and some of the small cells are supported by fiber, do not require tower connections, so there, I mean.
If
it
fiber's
depends.
there.
I'm sorry, yeah, so I mean, again, if fiber's there, it can be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, a lot of the areas, so
it's a lot
unfortunately.
easier with pole-based facilities, because there's fiber on a lot of poles.
Yes, correct.
And that could be taken into consideration for small cell locations.
Absolutely.
Is that Optimum fiber?
It depends.
It
I mean,
depends.
Verizon's got Fios out here, I think.
Yeah, that's correct.
There's a lot of different fiber.
Optimum has fiber also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Optimum
Optimum
is
has
a
fiber
whole
too,
Yeah,
yeah.
they do.
So, but again, in most instances that I'm familiar with, it's been fiber-based.
Yep.
In New York City, for example, they're all fiber-based. But
Yes.
also the amount of traffic that they get on one of those small cells is much, much higher.
Correct. It's true. Gentlemen, all the way in the back.
Yeah, the new code is accepted, the carriers are thrilled. What's the optimum time that something will take effect?
That's a tough one. I mean,
Ballpark.
ballpark. I can tell you from what I've filed and what it takes, but it's more than that. So even if I have a completed application, which I've gone to Heather's office with boxes of information because we have to, right? We have to provide the need and the backup information. And once it's received, usually I would say within 30 days, they get back to us and say, oh, we need this information, or this is unclear. And so that, they can't just give us a hearing date because it's not deemed complete. So they do a thorough review of everything, and sometimes it just takes another extra couple of months to go back and forth, to put it together, and then hand it in again.
Is it 2 years, 5 years?
Yeah, will I live to see this?
We hope,
That's a real
we
question.
absolutely hope.
Yeah, well, that gets back to
When they
incentivization.
will increase the
How do we
self-service?
move it?
A
I'm sorry,
commitment
what's
from the town, from the bureaucracy, because that, in my view, I think it holds up a lot. And I think you admit to that by saying the new code is necessary.
Yes.
So is there a commitment to the town that says, we commit to improve cell service within a 2-year period, within a 6-month period, within a 1-year period?
Great question.
Well, I'd hoped the supervisor would come and be able to. I know they're committed to doing that. I know our Department of Planning is committed. I know that one of the things we put into this new code is you don't even have to go to planning board for some of these things, which will very much shorten the time frame.
But if it becomes an official commitment, it's kind of something
Yeah,
that
I
you gotta
would,
stand
I
by.
would say, when they have the hearing at the town board, because they're the ones who really, I can't really make that happen, but the town board could. I'd say that at the hearing.
Yes.
Also, the other side of it is just logistics. So how long does it take to build all this? How long does it take to make it happen? So that's why we want to sit down with people like Tanya and the carriers and say, look, here's our plan. We have a plan now. We really haven't had one in the past. It was just all, when it came along, we dealt with it. Now we have a plan. So asking them, like, what's it gonna take? If we facilitate everything, what's it gonna take you to build this out? And it's hard to answer that, but I would hope within a couple of years, we're in a much better place.
So are you encouraging us to come to the hearing in February so that we can be supportive of the town code change? Would that be
Supportive, and
helpful for you?
also asking for this question.
Yeah.
What is there a
Agreed.
commitment on
We should
the
all
town's
adhere
part to make this
in
happen?
February.
Yeah.
And support.
Is the recommendation to always build the tower as tall as possible?
It's not
Or
that, so.
Days that will come? and-
It's the need, right? So a lot of it, like in Albertson Marine, we initially we wanted to do 120, and we were even scared to do 120, because we're like, oh my God, the town might knock us down, we just didn't know. But then what happened was that the fire district really had bad service, and they said, we need a repeater, and it has to go to 150, or we're not gonna get to the people that we need to get to. So that dictated the height, is the need, and the need for emergency service provider at that. It wasn't even just the carrier, it was the fire district that told us, if we're gonna have firemen in a burning house, they need to be able to relay the message back and forth. So that drove the height from, initially I would go 120, but no, they needed 150, and it does a great job of propagating in the areas that was needed.
Should that be part of the code guide, like as high as possible?
It is in the code.
As high as possible.
As high as needed.
As needed, we have to
That's the
provide the need,
terminology.
right, so
Possible with-
right,
Okay.
right, and so when I look at facilities, I
Especially with
always,
boats coming in.
yeah, so I always approach, yes, cell tower, cell business, that's me, but I always approach, Southold Fire District, Cutchogue, whichever district is in your area, I always approach them first, because for me, that's paramount, right? That's gonna tell me if you don't have cell service and they don't have service at all, there's a need, and so we're able to build the whole facility around that.
Heather?
Yeah,
Sorry,
first.
didn't you say that in the proposed code, the height is 120?
No, the
40, I
proposed is
think.
140, and then there's also a clause that says if it's needed to be higher, it can be higher.
That's what we thought.
And then there's a tower right behind Town Hall, but I don't know if it's even on.
It's AT&T.
Yeah,
Why
it's
isn't, that's
low.
not working, right?
It's AT&T.
Is it on?
Yeah, should we turn it on?
Yeah, it's the only place I can get AT&T in the North Fork. Anywhere else, forget about it.
Jack, I was gonna ask, did first responders here use FirstNet, which is an AT&T?
So New
wireless
York-
service? Because that's on cell rather than the fire.
That's correct. So in New York, they opted into FirstNet. FirstNet is part of AT&T. And so what happens is if there is an event where the first responders need to get their calls through, you might make a call, but you get bumped off because if there's police or fire, which we are opted into, they get priority on that network. And so, yes, to answer your question, if AT&T is there, then you have FirstNet. And FirstNet is something that New York has opted into.
Has Suffolk Police and Fire,
They have it.
they have it, okay.
Yeah, they have it.
So in the case,
I know you see me, but you don't see the people in the, gentleman in the back.
You've taken the planning board out of the process. Is the process?
Not entirely,
No.
but partially.
Right.
Well, my question was gonna be, is the process completely administrative, or is there a public hearing for each individual site that you're talking about?
The proposed code has certain circumstances where it won't need a hearing. And then if it doesn't meet those criteria, it would need a hearing.
Do you
So-
recall what those criteria were?
Yes, so if it's within a half mile of, one of those those P sites that show on the map, if it's 140 feet and a concealed tower, then it could be administratively approved. I think it's actually looser than that. I'm just trying to remember in my head and I don't have it with me, sorry. But if it goes outside of those parameters, then it would need a hearing. Like
Each tower?
If it's too close to the property line, there's very few instances where it needs a variance from the ZBA, where it would need a second hearing. But Albertsons did because they were right on the property
Yeah.
line.
Can I just ask you, what about the historic district? Because that's what we have a
Historic-
problem with it being an historic area.
Yes, there's an issue with that. It's addressed in the new code as well as the
Will
existing.
will we have to change our code too, our status?
No. There's a certain, I won't say a prohibition, but in historic districts, you should read that section. I don't have it memorized, but it addresses.
We have to address it.
Historic.
Yeah, we cannot change the look of the structure. But the structure can be accommodated to have the antennas inside, but nothing can change.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
It's a little higher.
Yeah,
That's
so
what we're trying to
even,
do with the church.
even though the wireless code is changing, the historic overlay is still in place to protect you know, the aesthetics of that corridor.
The church, have you put an application in?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're still working with
We're
it.
trying to, yeah, figure it
Well, call us.
Yeah.
We can sit down and talk.
out. Yeah,
Good, that's great to hear, thank you.
Shouldn't be a problem.
yeah.
We can take you up on Monday.
I'm sorry.
Okay, my question is, based on your answer to this gentleman. I have Verizon, and we have, from Verizon, a cell signal, extender. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. Does that have anything to do with what you said to him about other agencies using?
Completely different,
Completely different, okay.
yeah.
But if we could get that, that would be great. I live right behind the Presbyterian church, so. Call me.
You get donations accepted.
Yeah. 2018.
Under the new code requirements, it would be, yeah.
Even now,
Yeah, the other issue is that some of the other companies that are national and not a footprint on Long Island, they're okay with just having it the way it is. Whereas, you know, they're just collecting the rent, it's built, it's done, and it's been there for 20 years. And whereas for us, you know, we live locally, we know what the code requirements are, we try to maximize, and so I believe at the time, like for T-Mobile, they took advantage of the code. They were able to just do this shorter pole just for themselves, and then that stopped everyone else from trying to get their antennas on
Is
there.
that something we should, as a community, try to get behind? in some
So
way?
I am talking
that
to
being
the
a
fire
full-time-
district in reference to that, because it's one of the things that really irks me every time I drive by, that the fire district doesn't have a facility that really serves them. It's only serving T-Mobile, and so that bothers me. And so I have already approached and discussed with them that as well. Because the facility, it's there already, it should be retrofitted or at least swapped out to something that is gonna accommodate everyone.
So is it helpful for us to weigh in on that?
You can call the local fire district, you know, in whatever district you're in, and just say, hey, you know, we now have a better understanding of how these facilities work. How can we support you? Because they don't hear from their residents when they have their meetings. They do have meetings at least once a month. And if you just pop in and say, we just went to a meeting, you know, with Heather, and we know the code is changing, like, what can we do to help you, knowing that these facilities are here, but they don't accommodate everyone?
Because I live on Main Bay, off of Main Bayview, and I might not live to see the big change, but I think downtown, if we could get that done, because wasn't there an incident at the IGA, anybody where somebody had a heart attack or something, and they couldn't communicate with the fire department, which was a
Right
football
there.
field away.
And it happens. And the other thing too, just that you know, a lot of fire districts on Long Island utilize Verizon. And they use Verizon on dispatching their communication with the hospital. So like, let's say someone is having an issue with, let's just say a stroke or something. The paramedics show up, and yeah, they're there to help, but they cannot administer medication or anything else without having dispatched orders. They have to say, this is what's happening with the person, this is what we see. The doctor at the hospital then tells them via the iPad what those orders are. It's a lot of people don't understand how much of this infrastructure involves in our day-to-day, and when it comes to emergency like that, they don't realize that the guys that are out on the front lines, they're not just using their radios, they're also using iPads that are dispatching orders and stuff like that for medications and what's happening with the patients. So it just goes even deeper than that, and a lot of this we provide to the town when we are at that hearing, and that's when you usually hear us. But the people who show up are the ones that are usually against it. They're not the ones who are for it, and so that's another hurdle that we usually go through as well.
There's a question here in the back.
Thank you. Would the fire department profit by allowing more carriers onto their?
They do get money from the carriers as well in order to have
So
the
why don't
facility.
they do it if they get more money?
It hasn't been that easy. And so, yeah, we are, again, I know I'm working with the various fire districts within Southold to do that. Just to let them know that this is what we do, this is what we provide, we pay for it, but we will share the revenue with the fire districts.
But what do you mean by hasn't been that easy? Why would the fire department have objected to that?
It was a code requirement, so
The old
It
code.
wasn't just that.
it's not just that,
It
it's
wasn't
just a bunch of other things as well.
I
So,
think there was a perception at one time that it wouldn't be received well
correct,
in the past.
correct.
And I don't know, I mean, you'd think they would have gotten over that by now, and then I don't know what else.
Yeah, a lot of times the fire districts are also leery of, not having the support of the community, right? Because when you think of the fire districts, they have so many different things that they're doing. When you go to their public meetings, their meetings monthly, you might see 1 or 2 people in there. They really don't have that much support. So when you talk about cell tower, they're worried that everyone's gonna come out with pitchforks. And so, again, we have to understand, without that support or you guys vocalizing, hey, we're okay with the cell tower, what can we do to help that? They don't know. They just don't.
Most of the meetings like this, this is the first meeting I've ever been to with the public being so supportive.
Yeah,
Most
that's true.
most of it is dominated by,
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons why there are these either real or perceived barriers. Most of it's, they're not in my backyard, I just don't want it near me, or, other concerns that are really baseless. And I think it's important to have, if you come out and say this, because it really is, it's a safety problem, and it's a problem for first responders, because they're not as, they can't be as effective as they are sometimes equipped to be. And the voices around here are typically drowned out by the naysayers, because they're much more vocal.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do to maintain this level of support, I think to answer the question about what's gonna make things move quickly, it's this. If you basically say and recognize that we need service, and one of the reasons, for example, why a lot of people have Verizon is because they may have a place in New York where Verizon is better.
Right.
And so you don't wanna have 2 carriers, but this is the new need that you're gonna have, and it's great that you're all voicing it, because normally the voices are on the other side of the argument.
But the
It's a
meetings have
business
to be
problem.
advertised. They have to be
It's not just a convenience.
So it's a necessity.
Yes.
It's a necessity.
My entire checkout system, my entire POS runs on internet,
Yeah.
and Optimum was down more times than I even
Modern-
wanna talk
modern
about
cars,
this year.
I think it's a
And
driving
the
safety.
cellular is a backup for me
Yeah.
for that, and it doesn't work at my store, so I have no way of
Right,
Or in a hurricane.
checking a person out at the counter.
right.
Yeah. And Noreen, thank you, and I know we should wrap up. I wanted to let you guys know that we have copies that Heather had provided. We have a few copies of the track changes and the proposed changes, so that people can review it, and maybe we can also, is this gonna be online too, that people
Yeah,
can look at?
whenever it gets noticed. So there may be some changes that happen to that, before, it gets set for hearing. The only things I've noticed that need changing, there's some procedural things, not really substantive.
Okay. And
Yeah,
I
it'll
think-
get published.
I had to make sure that you had a copy too. And the other thing, Noreen, thank you for mentioning it. I know that there is a small business owner who mentioned to me, who couldn't be here today. She said that she uses, I think she's on Verizon, everybody uses tap to pay right now. And so she said it has happened multiple times that somebody taps to pay, leaves, and it circles and circles and circles forever, and then it doesn't go through. So the person's just taken the thing and she's lost the sale, right? So yeah, for business owners. Can we give them a hand? And from what we've heard from everybody, right, it's like, let's go talk to the fire department, let's show up at some of those meetings, and let's show up at the public hearing when they know, right?
And join your civic.
Apropos of what this gentleman said.
Join your civic.
One of the things you can do is join your local civic.
Yay.
Who sponsors these type of activities.
Yeah.
Woo!
And then we can have like-minded people offsetting the naysayers.
And we will,
We have
if
some.
we have your email, we'll send you an email about when the public hearing is. So if you want to join our email list, please do so on the way out. You want to come down too?